Hey, we're Saints. Father Chris here. Welcome to our crucifixional live stream. Glad to have you beautiful people with us. Let's talk about what everybody's talking about, the blasphemy that went on at the Olympics in their opening ceremonies. And, I know it's all over the place and there are conflicting views or differing views, different opinions. It was an affront against the Lord and the Lord's Supper in the Da Vinci painting. No, it was Dionysios, the Greek god of wine. And, it was, what do they call it? Bacchanalia. So, yeah, so it's like, all that stuff's going on. You're all aware of it. If you're not aware of it, then you probably need to come out from under the rock that you're hiding. Because I, who am not a news reader or involved in that kind of stuff, and really not a social media consumer, I even saw it. Right, it's all over the place. I preached on it on Sunday, so if you, it received nice commentary. So if you haven't seen that sermon, you can go to our YouTube channel and check out the sermons playlist. You'll find it's the most recent one. So I want to address it today a little bit, and I might go a little longer than normal because I think it's an important thing. Let's start with this. Very clearly, regardless of what anybody says, it was obviously an assault against the Lord's Supper. The positioning of the actors and actresses. It is what it is. You can backtrack and say that it was Dionysios and Bacchanalia. But we all know. I know that there are also people out there who are going to say like, yeah, look, the Olympic Committee came back and said yes, the organizer, Jolly, I think was his name, used the Last Supper as, the backdrop, but then he used Dionysios, to talk about Greek gods for love and acceptance of all that kind of stuff. But think about that in and of itself, right? So like even when they say that, hey, look, yeah, he used Da Vinci's Last Supper, but then he put a Greek god in the middle of it. That's an insult, right, in and of itself right there, right? You can see it's just, we all know nobody on the planet, no matter how much they backtrack or defend, is really able to escape what it ultimately was. Now, here's the thing. You're going to laugh at me when I say it, but I loved it, right? I loved that they did it. Not because it was good. It was crude. We all know it was crude. there was, transgender people and cross-dressers, and even one person had, his genitalia hanging out there a little bit under the screen. That kind of stuff is crude. We all know it. It just wasn't good. They chopped off Marie Antoinette's head, right? They had her head. I didn't see that part, but I heard that. It just wasn't good. All of that to say, then, therefore, Father Chris, why did you love it? I loved it because it's ultimately a declaration of war. Let's just say it. This woke theology, all this kind of chaotic stuff that's going on out there, this secular mind, this kind of twisted and corrupted mind, they said, hey, they blew the bugle, baby, right? They blew the trumpet of war and saying, we're coming after traditional Christian values. I would say, we're coming after, the stuff that many people subscribe to. That's why I think there was such backlash, because they felt, many Christians, Greg and I got contacted so much, there were angst and hurt. People were like, what is going on, right? Help us with this. So the assault was there. Like I said, they blew the trumpet of war. So people had an opportunity to respond by, in some sense, laying down, right? It's really funny. I'm going to take a different approach than you might expect today, the approach of a warrior saint. But one approach, and we saw it a lot, was, pray for them and forgive them. Absolutely. Absolutely. At what point would you ever hear someone, at least me, say don't forgive them or don't pray for them, right? I even went the route of why is this causing you stress? Why does it bother you? You're Christians. You have to expect assault, right? You have to expect that the world will come after you because you're preaching a message that they don't want to hear. Look, and watch that sermon Sunday, by the way. We talked about it. They did that mimicry or mockery on The Simpsons. They did it on The Sopranos. They did it on MASH. They did it on Lost. They did it on South Park. And of course, most of you probably, or at least the older ones know about, History of the World Part 1, Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks did it, right? It's not a new thing, right? So that assault has been out there. They're after it. It's there. And so some people, as Christians, we got nervous with it or afraid of getting involved in the fray, even though that war was thrown, look, I'm rambling today, but listen, even in, what is it? Greg, I'm losing my words. The Lord of the Rings in the second one, right? Theoden, king of the Rohan, doesn't want to go to war. He's like, war is coming. They're like, no, baby, war is here, right? Like it's on your doorstep. And so when people in this, environment of the blasphemy at the Olympics felt that war on the doorstep, we softened on it. Let's just pray and not, like I said, it shouldn't upset you. You got to expect it. But do we have to go soft on it? Yes, you need to pray for your enemies. Absolutely. And yes, you need to forgive them. I have. I don't even know that I ever needed to. I wasn't upset. I anticipate this. But as Christians, as warrior saints, are we to lay down and die, or are we to get up and fight? I think the war call has been, the bugle has been blown, the trumpet's been blown. It's time to get up. And God, I think, through the Apostle Paul, is telling us that very same thing. I don't think this is just me being, reckless about it. I mean, I think I'm looking to, if I can use the word, a counterattack, or to fight back through traditional biblical values, meaning let's do and respond the way God has asked us to respond. I mean, I don't want to do it like all the people in the world, who are fighting back and, down with them and crush them. And I don't want to do it like others who are, like we said, laid down and died on it and just went soft on it. I mean, none of this stuff really works. But if we can respond the way that God has asked us to respond, baby, I'm telling you, that's the only thing that works. And it's funny because the gospel of the cross is the only thing that really shouldn't work, right? It seems like defeat, and yet it's the only thing that does work. As Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians, it's the power of God, right? And so the question then, all right, Father Chris, quit rambling and get to it. Here it is. God has told us to put on armor for the battle, right? Like, think about it in the context of the Roman Empire within which St. Paul was writing. Anytime a soldier would go out to war, they first put on their armor to protect themselves. We even do this in modern warfare, right? Like the modern American soldiers and others, they wear Kevlar, right? And they have helmets on their heads. I mean, those things are protective in order to protect them from a stray bullet, or not a stray bullet, from some type of assault. Paul is saying, hey, baby, here's Ephesians, right? Put on the armor of God. Listen to these 3 verses in chapters 6, verses 10, 11, 12. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we are not contending against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against the powers, against the world rulers of this present darkness, against the spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Paul was writing that about 2,000 years ago, but boy, it sounds a lot like today, right? Like, I mean, the world powers, the rulers of this present world, and he compares them with darkness. It's Greek skotia, right? Like darkness. And I mean, that's what we're facing, and that's what people feel. They feel that darkness and that struggle and that suffering, and we better protect ourselves with armor against it. Now, here's the kicker. The armor that the modern soldier puts on is Kevlar, a helmet, guns, bullets, grenades, all that stuff. The armor that the Romans would use at the time of writing, they put on defensive armor, but they had swords, and they would have, not slingshots, what are those things called? Catapults, where they'd throw flaming boulders at one another, and spears, and, all this offensive weaponry. In the armor of God that Paul is telling us to put on so that we might stand, it's all interesting. It's 6 parts. 5 of them are defensive, but they're not defensive in and of themselves. They are metaphors for what he gives us. Look, in verse 13, first, gird your loins with what? Truth, right? What's the next one? Put on the breastplate of righteousness. Then you want to cover and protect your feet, shod your feet with the gospel of peace. Then you want to protect with a shield of faith and a helmet of salvation, right? You can see those 5 are all to protect us, but they're not about shields and helmets and breastplates. It's about truth, righteousness. It's about peace with other people. It's about faith, having faith in God, so that leading towards that salvation. And the way that's done is with the one offensive weapon, which is the last verse you see, take up the sword, right? The sword of the Spirit, which is what? The Word of God. So in this armor that Paul is putting us, or asking us to put on, he's cladding us for battle, but in a very different way, not in a way of the world. Again, think about the context, right, of the Roman Empire, the Pax Romana that they were after, the Roman peace, right? They were trying to find that through the sword, and they would go out and conquer barbarian nations with the sword. And, the catapults and spears and all the rest of that stuff. Paul is saying, really, none of that's really going to give you peace. The gospel, will give you peace. But in order to find that peace, you have to seek truth. You have to seek what's actually real and right, and not fall, victim to all of the rest of the chaos that the world is putting out there. In righteousness, it's a very legalistic, whatever, technical term in Scripture. It means that when God gives a commandment and you abide by it, he declares you righteous, right? That's what, we have to seek to do God's will. We have to be, and his will is peace, all right? That's the third part, and on it goes. You can see it's a very different way of looking at things. And I realize that at this point, I'm probably spewing ramble out here because my brain is just going so fast with all this stuff. It's time. We've been called to be different, right? We're not called to lay down on this. I think very much, if we're going to be warrior saints and to be able to put, and I think you should, hashtag I am a warrior saint, start writing it on your stuff, hashtag I am a warrior saint. Look, if we're called to be warrior saints, we got to fight, right? But we don't fight the way of the world. We don't fight to hurt and assault and attack and harm other people. We don't fight to do to them what they have done to us, right? We fight in a different way, a way of the cross. And even though it may seem to the world though it doesn't work, it's actually the only thing that does work. It's life-changing. It's transformative. It is something that, it's just a whole new way of looking at things, an entirely different way of looking at things. And look, again, to quote Paul in Corinthians, right? In 1 Corinthians, he says it's a stumbling block to the Jews and folly to the Gentiles, the gospel of the cross. I always love to quote this text. In Greek, the word translated as folly or foolishness is from moria. It means moronic, right? It's where we get the English moron. It's completely against the way of the world, and yet it's beautiful. And I want you to start really even thinking positively about it, my beautiful warrior saints, because it's not this, look at it like this. I've switched the framework in my mind. It's not like, oh my gosh, I have to now stand up and fight and I don't want to, but God has asked me, I'm going to, and so therefore I'll do it. But it's it's uncomfortable. No, it's beautiful. What are you ashamed of? We're soldiers who preach the gospel of peace, of truth, of righteousness. It's beautiful. It's an opportunity that God has given to us. It's a blessing in some sense. We don't have to be snarky jerks about it. You're not going to hear me go out there and see me in a confrontation with someone one-on-one. You're so bad. The gospel is such, forgive the silliness, the gospel is such good news, and it's so transformative. I want to share it with people, right? It's an opportunity, it's a blessing that God has given me. You can do it nicely, you can do it with gentility, you can do it, at some point you realize others don't want to hear it, great, there's someone else who does, move on with that. But it's not something that is, I don't want you to look at it as like a sad thing. It's a beautiful opportunity. And here I'm going to stop rambling today with this. When you do that and put it in your own life, because we're doing that as Warrior Saints, as the academy that we produce. Look, we're trying very hard to implement what we teach in our own lives. And I'm telling you, today, I am a very different man than I was literally yesterday, and way different than I was 5 and 10 and 20 years ago. By doing this in my own life, and Greg, I know, and his and the rest of our team, it really is freeing. It really brings peace. As the gospel is the only thing that can bring peace. And our hope is that if you are looking for that too, you're going to put hashtag I am a warrior saint, baby. Let's get some. Remember, I'm going to wrap up my all over the placeness today with the following. They declared war, right? And it's not even new. It's not like we knew this war, it didn't already exist. We've been waging this war since the dawn of time, really. They just blew the trumpet once again. And that's a good thing, because it let us know exactly where they stand. And it was a call for us to be warrior saints and to say, look, I'm not going to lay down on this. Yes, I'm going to pray, and yes, I'm going to forgive and do all of those beautiful things. But as Christians, we must, as Paul says, stand against the darkness and the wiles of the devil, against the world powers, and all of this evil that is out there. And we do so not with a sword to chop heads, but a sword that leads to truth and righteousness and peace and hope and love, forgiveness, ultimately leading towards salvation. That, my beautiful warrior saints, is only by knowing the traditional Christian and biblical, really, values, the Word of God, which is the sword. Love you. Forgive my rambling, but as you can tell, this was impassioned because it's just, the whole thing is just, it is what it is. We're going to be back tomorrow. Maybe we'll continue on this line of thinking with the armor of God. But until then, please share us, like us, hit the link tree, do whatever you want to do. We love it, love you, and we'll see you as always. Keep walking on the way of the warrior saint.